Hello, everyone. I'm Phil DeVol, and I'll be doing this webinar today. There's a whole lot of these webinars coming out, so you can always check our website and see what's going on. This one is for organizations that are already using bridges and want to have a bigger impact on poverty. If you've never heard about bridges, I suggest that you go to our website and find a recent webinar done by Terry Drucy-Smith. What is Bridges Out of Poverty? So I won't have the time to teach the core constructs today, but you can sit in and see what you think, because we've been at this for 20 years or more, and most people are interested in how can we have a bigger impact in our communities. So these are the books that this webinar is based on. I think of the Bridges Out of Poverty book as the book for the middle class. Our trainings are for people that work with people in poverty in all kinds of settings. To get the core ideas across to that group, they tend to be thinking in a middle class mindset. The other book, Getting Ahead in a Just Getting By World, is for people that are under-resourced, struggling to get by, people in poverty. And the concepts are basically the same, expressed differently, taught differently, and so on. And I think of that as that's the book for people that are under-resourced. Bridges to Sustainable Communities is a book for people who are leaders in the community, legislators, mayors, county commissioners and the like. And so I think of this as a book for each class. And then we have a common language. And finally, the book you see down below, Bridges Across Every Divide, is really for all of us that do the above to get better at taking this to the policy level. So it's been some time since we've been doing this, and now there's enough Bridges communities, I think, that we can begin to think bigger. So that's kind of what this is about. So what's your current situation? Are you just beginning a Bridges initiative? Are you thinking that you're not going deep enough? You're not getting the buy-in you need? Are you stalling out? Sometimes Bridges collaboratives have sort of a wave of up and down and up and down, and it doesn't seem to be being a trend up. And are you worried about that? Do you want to expand and don't know how? Are things going well, but you want to do more? And then finally, it could be that you're a champion already and you want to help others. And so those, if you're in that category, of course, we're a learning community, so a lot of this is based on the great stuff that people have been doing already. So what we find is that there are strengths and weaknesses for different settings. And so you can decide which of these is your setting and kind of reflect on these broad general kind of generalizations about what it's like to work in these different settings. So in small rural towns and counties, the strengths are that you and your team have a lot of people, right? So if you're really well connected, I was just in Mississippi, and Holmes County there is the poorest county in the state, and I think the poorest county in the country. But after our conversation, the people that were there said, we do know everybody, and with that kind of social capital, we should make good use of it. And there's a strong sense of community in those smaller places. So those are strengths. But the weaknesses is that there's going to be problems with financial support and very few resources. And you should be thinking about commuting zones. If you were to look that up on the internet, you would find out that where you live matters. And so how far do you have to drive to get a good paying job? And what's your possibility of people in your community moving from one quintile to the next? So rural areas like this are hard to get started in. And then the small and mid-sized cities, the strengths are that, again, a lot of the people and you have influence with key players, and there's more resources, and there's also a strong sense of community. Some of the weaknesses would be some key players sometimes block things because it's a small place, and if you have a judge or a mayor or somebody who's it doesn't like this kind of work, it's a little harder to push against that. And then there's this issue of CEOs coming and going. And I don't mean just CEOs, executive directors and so on. So sometimes you get a person who's really supportive of a Bridges initiative, and then they get a new job or move, and then the thing kind of falls flat. So those things have been the things we've encountered along the way. Even so, our biggest success and our strongest Bridges collaboratives are in mid-sized cities. So that's kind of the sweet spot we found out. When you get into the bigger cities, the strengths are there's more resources, and also we need to think about breaking this down into neighborhoods. Just talking to the people in Oklahoma just not long ago, Frank Merrick was saying he wants to kind of get at the Oklahoma city and look at the different neighborhoods and start Bridges collaboratives in neighborhoods. And that way you sort of take it in bites. Now the weaknesses here are there are so many players, and also this thing called Poverty Inc. When you get into big places like Cleveland, Ohio, and the like, there are people that have been doing poverty work for a long time. These are institutionalized organizations that poverty is sort of branded to them. And so sometimes they embrace Bridges but want to own it. Other times they don't embrace it, and they have a hard time collaborating with each other when it comes to using Bridges. They want to operate their own work as they've been doing it for some time. And then there's political complexities, and it's harder to influence leaders when you're in a big city. So those are some of the things we have to take into account when you're talking about having a bigger impact in a Bridges collaborative in your community. So we've been at this for 20 plus years, and we're in 47 states and 6 countries. And we're hearing from people. I've had a couple of writers that work for magazines and so on saying, you know, we've checked this out, and the Bridges Getting Ahead stuff is really widely used. Has there ever been an article done about, you know, about that whole thing? And so we are one of the few entities that's working at this topic that has a broad reach across this country and is known in other places too. And then there are champions that work in several sectors, and that can encourage others to use the work too. So sector work is another sort of aspect. There's community work, sectors play a part in that, but then the private sector, for-profit entities and so on that use our work can work really nicely across state lines in different cities in support of the same kind of work. So we're a learning community. And there's good research that's come in on Getting Ahead that's positive. Getting Ahead is a program with a beginning, middle, and an end, and model fidelity, and so it's easier to study than a big Bridges initiative that is sprawling and hard to define. So just some things that we found about sort of some definitions, if you like, about how things happen as you develop. So there's always a catalyst in every place that becomes a Bridges collaborative, but you never know who it's going to be. And sometimes it's a very powerful person, and sometimes it's a person that has no influence at all. And then they kind of build slowly. In that case, some places get off the ground quickly. So you can't pick the catalyst. So they invite our work. We come in, we start training and spreading the ideas. And then it's a matter of like building off of that catalyst. And so that is a very important role we recognize, and we always value the catalyst. The next thing is to find an organization that's going to be a backbone organization, we call it, some place that's accustomed to doing administrative work, you know, writing grants and, you know, collecting data and the like, and creating databases. And you want a strong backbone organization to build around that can take care of these matters for you. And of course, those vary greatly too. So those are things that we can't predict, but we also want to, you know, be able to work with and encourage people to get a backbone organization that's going to be around. So, you know, it has to be something pretty well established in the community. So sometimes people start nonprofits, which is one way of going about it. And sometimes they attach themselves to a particular organization that does that work for the collaborative. So then funding is a big deal, being able to write grants. And if you have foundational support, that's really wonderful. Many of the sectors have their own money, and so they're paying for the training and the books and those kind of things. But when you start building a collaborative, and you're doing lots of getting ahead and so on, then you know, if you had a foundation that was to support you, I think Muskogee, Oklahoma was one of the places that was really blessed to have the city foundation give them $1 million to get them off the ground, a 5-year $1 million, and if you do well, we'll give you another. So when you have a philanthropist thinking that way, it really helps if they're thinking big picture like that and not doing short-term funding. And then I've already mentioned leaders coming and going, right? So that's something that if you do your work deeply enough, as you'll see as we go along, there'll be enough of the work in place so that a new executive director comes in, it's already there. It's not going to be dissolved immediately. Instead, the person can just step right in and keep doing what's the good work that's going on. And then our process is to encourage innovation. So in Schenectady, New York, Mike Sicoscio said, okay, we train, embed, create a model, and spread. And so that's how this work is so exciting, because we can never tell what brilliant things are going to happen using our work. This is the beauty of it. And so that's the process. The whole lot of the content, the ideas, the books and so on and trainings come from a hot process. But beyond that, you have your own culture, your history, your best practices and relationships, and everything has to be made relevant where you are, right? So innovation takes place there. And then there's one key principle I want to draw to your attention, because when you're thinking about this administrative stuff, the idea is that everyone owns it and no one owns it. If it gets branded to one place and that CEO runs with it, good things can happen. But if that person goes away and the others don't feel like they own it, the whole thing sort of collapses. So every institution should feel like it owns it, uses it, gets good results, and is part of a collaborative. So the collaborative would be what owns it. Everybody owns it, right? And no one place is it has it branded to themselves. So these are just lessons learned along the way. Now, these are the sectors that we can serve. And all of you are familiar with these if you're familiar with bridges. So we have community work on the left, or resources for the resourced, and on the right are the products for the under-resourced. So we have community work, K-12, the workplace, criminal justice, health and healthcare, and then finally higher ed. So I'm sure that Ruth Wyrick is probably writing a book right now for dog catchers, but you know, we keep expanding this and getting into new areas and reaching out as the ideas come back. The learning community provides stuff. The next thing you know, there's more material for more sectors. So some assumptions about you, the audience. I've already said that we think you know the bridges and getting ahead language. So we don't have time to go into all of these things, but again, if you're not familiar with this, you would want to go to Terry Druzy's webinar about what is bridges and learn this stuff for yourself. And then we have these bridges constructs, and these are the underlying foundational pieces that that everybody in all these places use as a common language. I think this is the beauty of our work. We bring people from all these different sectors in the community, and we're able to engage people that are from all classes, all races, all sectors and political persuasions, because we have a common language. And this makes it a very wonderful place to interact with others, because the diversity that we have in that place is all focused on doing something about poverty. And if you're there, then all of your things that are divisive in America today, like our politics of the left and right, those things don't get kicked off. Everyone's just focused on working on poverty issues together with the people that are in this collaborative. So it's one very sweet and wonderful place in American scheme of things right now. So we have an assessment tool to measure the impact of a Bridges initiative. Now, this is something that is a work in progress, I'll admit, and I would hope that you give us feedback on this and tell us what you think. But I'm going to give you sort of the across the top of this and let you just get an idea of what this is about. And then we can talk about it later. You can get a hold of us. Our emails will be on the last slide. But when you take this, there's a possible score of 160. And so the very first thing that we think it takes to move a community into doing really profound and great work with their collaborative is this critical mass score. So critical mass is defined as the minimum size or amount of something required to start or maintain a venture, right? So that's the Bridges constructs. So the people that are doing this now are certified Bridges trainers. So there's national trainers running around the country doing this too, but then we have a way of certifying Bridges trainers. So do you have enough certified Bridges trainers to cover all the sectors and partnerships? Score this on a 1 to 5, using your own thoughts on this. Certified getting ahead facilitators. We need those because we want to engage people in poverty so they're at the table with us. And you need to have it done in several sites. So where are you in a 1 to 5? And I can imagine now, if you want, you have a piece of paper there, just kind of score yourself. Critical mass. Yeah, we're a 5 on certified Bridges trainers. We have several of them in the community. Maybe we need a few more getting ahead facilitators to get to more sites. So this is sort of a, it's not hard science, but you could be tracking your score as we go. And then the numbers trained per capita, not percent of the target population. And again, this is kind of vague, but you know who you're after. And the idea being that if the more people that hear about this work, the more people are into it, the more likely you're going to be at a place where you can do something significant about poverty. And finally, the number of, or the percent of the target population of getting ahead grads. And you need people coming out of getting ahead because they are the ones that are going to be the high octane fuel in your initiative. So there's one score. The next is engagement. And this is worth 25 points altogether, but you get to kind of score yourself again. Are you engaging all classes? In other words, middle class, poverty, and the wealth. And wealthy folks might be harder to get to, but this is why do we need all classes at the table, right? So score yourself on this. And if you don't think you're reaching the people in poverty enough or the wealthy folks enough, that would be, affect your score. Now, the other thing is we want to engage all classes and we want them all at the table. And one way to do that is to do getting ahead where there's diversity. So this is just a natural thing. The more people that are in getting ahead, they're going to bring the diversity with them. So you want to have community leaders that are from African-American settings or Hispanic and white neighborhoods, and you want to have as much diversity in race-wise as you possibly can. And then just naturally, you're going to have people from different political persuasions, and that has to do with our work on the 4 causes of poverty. One of those, supports the thinking of conservatives. The other supports the thinking of liberals and everything in between. And when we do interviews with our Bridges sites, we ask, do you have people from the left and right involved? And we always hear that you do. So we are doing that. So give yourself a score locally on that. And then finally, and I think this is hugely important because if you stay at the individual level and train everyone that we've just been talking about, but you don't make any changes in the institutions, you will run out of steam. You have to be using this in your institutions. So here are some questions. Your staff volunteer board training, you need 100% of them trained. Give yourself a 1 to 5. The client life cycle, did you conduct that? I find this to be the way to find out what needs to be changed in your institution, given all the Bridges constructs and ideas that we have. If you don't change the way your policies run, your procedures work, the environment and the design of programs, the way people are treated from the time they come in to the time they leave, and you don't change it for them, you won't get the wonderful reward of having better outcomes at your organization. That is what gets the buy-in from the institutions. They will stick with it if they're getting the results. And then, are you documenting change in outcomes? Identify the changes, the quantified outcomes and so on. Are you doing that kind of work? So that's 1 to 10, right, on that. So you're adding up the scores as we move along. Now, number 4 is the sectors that are engaged. So these are each one of these. Well, you can see if you have 1 to 3, you get 5 points, 4 to 7, 10, 8 to 11, 15, so on. So all of these sectors are affected by poverty and can have an impact on poverty. And so this is who should be trained in Bridges. So if you are going to get the critical mass, this is where your trainers would be going. As you know, they're partners of yours, and they get their own certified trainers and so on. Now, when all of them start using this work, and all of them are getting better results because of it, you have so much ownership of bridges. Every one of these sectors will be going, we own it. You know, we love what we've done. We want to share our ideas. We want to come to the collaborative. And then we're running into barriers, and the barriers that we experience and our graduates experience and our clients experience, we're going to have to overcome those. And that means you're moving to real significant change, right? You're beginning to have change at a higher and higher level. So this is really important. Now, about your Bridges Collaborative. Again, the scoring mechanism here is the board makeup. All classes, races, sectors, and political persuasions. Are they all there, right? I would say you don't want tokens here. You know, when you're talking about classes and races, it should be proportionate. And there's lots of getting ahead graduates that would love to serve on planning and decision-making boards. So they should be represented because this is about their lives. What kind of learning community activities are going on? Are you sharing your best practices in the community? Are you sharing them through the Bridges work, through the website and so on that we have? Do you have data management? Are you collecting data on these things and being able to report on the outcomes? And are you connected with anybody doing research? So if all of those, you know, you can score yourself high on these, that would be great if you're working on policy and so on. Now, this is getting higher and higher, if you've noticed, right? So we started out with individual change, and now we're talking institutional. Now we're talking community. And so if you haven't been around long, you know, you might not be at this place right now. So you should be thinking, what comes next? And I'm hoping to give you some of that. What comes next, and what can we do to get there, right? So we're sort of, you know, the end in mind. You know, think of the end as you're kind of working with this. Sometimes we get so caught up in just running getting ahead groups that we forget to go and raise our horizon and take a look at what the collaborative can be doing. Number 6 is what changes have taken place at the institutional level, what changes have taken place at the community level. So when you start making changes at the institutional level, you know, your institution's happy, you share those ideas with other people. At the community level, you're taking on bigger issues. I would say if the water fees in Muskogee are a problem and the collaborative takes care of it, that's great. If you're in Marion, Ohio, and the jail is charging fees for booking in, and then a daily rate once you're there, and this doesn't seem right to you, then in Marion, Ohio, they dealt with that as a collaborative. So, and then when you get to the state level, Gene Krebs, who wrote Bridges Across Every Divide with me, we were able to work with the state and get $11.5 million poured into Ohio for startups of Bridges style county level initiatives. So there is possibility that these are the kind of things that you should be thinking about. So score yourself on those. And then the last one is about the impact. The maximum impact here is 25 points for this one. And what you're looking at is, has there been recognition of your initiative by the media, by civic groups, by political groups, by the neighborhoods, and by philanthropists and funders? Give yourself 1 to 5 for each one of those, and you're getting close to finding out what your total is. So I did say that this is under development, and so there's some things that it doesn't do. It doesn't include information for organizations not associated with the collaborative. So sometimes hospital will take this and run with it and get better work with their new hires from poverty, or somebody's working in healthcare on preventive work and using Getting Ahead, and it's not part of the collaborative. So it doesn't capture everything because some of the sectors and some of the work being done is sort of outside of the collaborative work, and they don't get quite in. So the other thing that we're working on this is to understand eventually, by putting this out there, you can expect us to come out with a much, I should say, detailed scoring mechanism for you. This is going over the very surface of it. At the end of this, we'll be able to ascertain where the biggest value is, because right now you just went through 7 of these and you scored yourself and you end up with a score, but that doesn't tell us which of these is most important. For example, is it having a good funding base? You know, if, as in Muskogee, they got $1 million to get started, that's really nice. Is that what it takes? Or is it the strength of a collaborative? Or is it of institutions taking charge and owning their own success where they are? So we don't know, in that sense, which of these is most valuable and how would they would be ranked. But what I look forward to is a day when this is in use, and then we can really take a look at this. What does it take to build a Bridges collaborative that gets really great work done? And that would be kind of the gold standard. Can you have influence on policy at the institutional, community, and state level? And that's where we want to go with this. That's when we can, as in Ohio, we're trying to get as many of the Bridges collaboratives in Ohio to come together and work on policy issues at the state level. And we can have so much more influence if we think about the grand scheme and that kind of approach from the time that we begin designing this. So there's some bonus points we can give you, okay? And one is if you do the follow-up activities form by your certified Bridges trainers, and I'm going to show you that form because it's so important. And if you're not collecting this information from the people doing Bridges training in your community, and basically it's to find out what people want to do, how they want to become engaged in this work. If you're not collecting that, you have no idea of all these people that got attracted to our work on how to engage them. You haven't put someone's name in your database and all their interests. If you do that, you have a database that you can go into again and again, and you can say, hey, those of you that are interested in workplace stability and doing things with the private sector and building ERNs and all those wonderful things, we're having Ruth come to town, and we want you to be there, and let's build this. And you would have a database with all that information on it. The other thing is that you get 5 points if you use Charity Tracker for taking data from Getting Ahead investigators at the beginning when they're filling out a stability score and a resource score and the ROI, and then checking with them 3 months, 6 months, 12 months and on, and being able to report on the success of people coming out of Getting Ahead. So 5 points if you do that. Another 5 points if you attend a national conference, because that's a beautiful learning community. And then the book that Gene and I wrote, Bridges Across Every Divide, if you go to the advocacy evaluation in that book, and if you read that book or you go and read that piece, you get 5 points for doing that too. So at the end of this, you've got a total for how things are going where you are. Now, here is the follow-up activity that captures the interest of everyone in the audience, and they turn this into you and you put it in a daily. Now, this would be something that your backbone organization does, right? So you need someone with a computer and the capacity to put this information in. So things like attending a full day training by a national consultant, sending staff to a full day Bridges training, because sometimes people hear this and they work in one institution, they go, my staff needs this, right? So we should capture that. Serving on an organizational committee or a community level Bridges collaborative. Do you want to do that? Now you get yourself, volunteers to serve on the collaborative. Serving at the regional or state level. Now your state may not be there yet, but think about it, because some of our states are at the place where they're working kind of above the counties. And then learning how to apply Bridges in your own organization or your sector, so everybody gets to say, where they are in terms of the sector that they're in. So that tells us specifically who needs to be trained in coming years. And then this list goes on of the sectors. And then finally, attending or sending a staff member to become a certified Bridges trainer, offering Getting Ahead to community members, attending a Getting Ahead facilitator training. all of these things are about building up and sharing the ideas. You know, it's if we don't get the bridges common language out there, that's the foundation. So all of this is in that with that goal in mind. So the people to get a hold of if you're interested in following up on this, and if you want to talk with me or Ruth or Lynn, we are the three people that are looking at this survey that I just shared with you. And we'd love to hear back from you. So please get in touch with us. And we'll keep working on this so that in the future, we'll have more and more smooth pathways for getting to doing really effective work in our communities and in our states. So thanks so much for attending this with me, and look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.
Thank you, Phil. That was wonderful. I like those assessments and look forward to seeing them being used in our communities. This is Ruth Wyrick, and we do offer these in the first and third